There was a time when going on the internet felt like freedom, when the promise of the digital age was that information belonged to everyone, when a search engine was just a tool, not a trap. And at the center of that promise was a simple line, printed in the founding documents of one of the most powerful companies ever built: "Don't be evil." 4 words, a clean, confident declaration. And for a moment, the world believed it. His name is Larry Page. He is one of the most consequential human beings alive, and almost no one can describe what he looks like today. He built an engine that organizes human knowledge, and then used that engine to build something else entirely. And when governments, journalists, and his own employees began asking hard questions, he vanished. How did a man who promised to make the world better end up building the most powerful surveillance machine in history, only to disappear into the shadows when the world started asking questions? Tonight we investigate the masquerade of virtue and the Machiavellian leadership required to turn a Stanford research project into a global empire of control. Lawrence Edward Page was born on March 26, 1973 in Lansing, Michigan. His father, Carl Victor Page Sr., was a professor of computer science and artificial intelligence at Michigan State University. His mother, Gloria, was an instructor in computer programming at the same institution. This was not a household where technology was a hobby. It was a religion. Page later recalled that his childhood home was usually a mess. Computers, science magazines, and popular science publications covering every surface. He was an avid reader, writing in his 2013 Google Founders letter that he spent a huge amount of his childhood immersed in books and magazines. When Larry was 6 years old in 1979, his father brought home an XCD Sorcerer computer. Larry soon mastered it and began using it for schoolwork. His parents divorced when he was 8, but he maintained relationships with both his mother and his father's long-term partner. Unlike the tech founders who later became his peers, who often forged their ambitions through pain, poverty, or rejection, Larry Page was forged in something subtler and perhaps more dangerous. From birth, he was surrounded by people who believed that technology was the answer to every question. He never had reason to doubt it. By the age of 12, he had already decided he wanted to start a company. At the University of Michigan, Page created an inkjet printer made of Lego bricks. He also proposed replacing the university's bus system with a personal rapid transit system, essentially a driverless monorail with a separate car for every passenger. This was the pattern that would define him for the next 3 decades. Not incremental improvements, but wholesale reimagination. Not fixing the system, replacing it. And doing so quietly, methodically, without asking permission. After earning his computer engineering degree with honors, he enrolled in a PhD program at Stanford University. That decision would change the world, for better and for worse. In 1995, the World Wide Web was a miracle with no map. There were millions of documents online, connected by links nobody had ever charted. Search engines existed, but they were blunt instruments, ranking pages by keywords, easily gamed, often useless. Larry Page looked at this chaos and saw a dissertation, then he saw something more. Page focused on the problem of discovering which web page is linked to a given page. The computing resources required to crawl the web at scale were well beyond the usual bounds of a student project, unaware of exactly what he was getting into. Page began building out his crawler, and the idea's complexity lured fellow PhD student Sergey Brin to the project. Together, Brin and Page developed the PageRank algorithm, which converted backlink data into a measure of importance for any given web page. They realized it could power a search engine far superior to anything that existed. Their research became the basis for a paper titled The Anatomy of a Large-Scale Hypertextual Web Search Engine, which became one of the most downloaded scientific documents in the history of the internet at the time. They named their prototype Backrub. Eventually, they needed a better name. They settled on Google, a play on Google, the mathematical term for the number 1 followed by 100 zeros. It reflected, they said, their mission to organize a seemingly infinite amount of information on the web. The name was also, in retrospect, a prophecy, because what Page would ultimately build was not just a search tool, it was something closer to total informational dominion. Their early attempts to interest technology companies and venture capital in their search engine mostly failed. Then Sun Microsystems co-founder Andy Bechtolsheim, during a brief meeting, offered to write them a check for $100,000 before Google Inc. even legally existed. Page and Brin incorporated the company in 1998 and relocated their servers from a dorm room to a friend's garage in Menlo Park, California. Within 3 years, Google was not just surviving, it was eating the internet, and its model of gathering user data to power advertising would redefine what it meant to be a free service. By 2004, Google had become something more than a company. It had become a civic institution, the infrastructure through which the world accessed knowledge. And with their IPO, Page and Brin made a public promise. In their founder's letter to shareholders, they wrote, "Don't be evil. We believe strongly that in the long term we will be better served, as shareholders and in all other ways, by a company that does good things for the world, even if we forego some short-term gains." It was the most audacious branding move in corporate history, and for a time the world believed them. The "Don't be evil" motto had first been suggested by a Google employee named Paul Buchheit at an internal meeting about corporate values around 2000. Buchheit, who would later create Gmail, said he wanted something that once you put it in there would be hard to take out, describing it also as a jab at competitors who were, in his view, exploiting users. But the motto always masked a more complicated reality, because from the very beginning, the business model that funded Google's idealism was the same one that would eventually undermine it: the extraction and monetization of human behavior at scale. Harvard Business School professor emerita Shoshana Zuboff, in her landmark analysis of surveillance capitalism, identified Google as the pioneer of an entirely new economic logic, one where human experience itself becomes raw material. According to Zuboff, this model was driven by a profit-making incentive and arose when advertising companies led by Google's AdWords saw the possibilities of using personal data to target consumers more precisely. As analysts noted reviewing Zuboff's work, without permission, without compensation, and with little in the way of resistance, the company seized and declared ownership over everyone's information. It turned the details of the lives of millions and then billions of people into its own property. Larry Page didn't invent surveillance capitalism alone, but he built the system that made it the organizing logic of the digital age, and he did it under a banner that said, "Don't be evil." One of the most underappreciated facts about Larry Page is the scope of what he built. Google was never just a search engine. It was, from very early on, a systematic attempt to insert itself into every layer of human experience, mapping the physical world, reading your email, following your location, watching your videos, operating your phone. Google dominates around 92% of the search market worldwide, with the majority of its revenue derived from search advertising. With approximately 8.2 billion search requests processed per day collected by devices around the clock, the company has become what researchers describe as a paradigm for how users find information while voluntarily providing data in exchange for free services. Since the mid-2000s, civil liberties organizations and government regulators have criticized Google over its data collection and retention policies, web tracking practices, and cooperation with intelligence agencies. In 2013, leaked NSA documents included Google on the list of companies cooperating with the PRISM surveillance program, which authorized the government to secretly access data of non-US citizens hosted by American companies. Following the leak, government officials acknowledged the program's existence. Google denied the existence of any government backdoor. In 2012 and 2013, Google reached two separate settlements, totaling over $39 million after being caught tracking users online without their knowledge, bypassing privacy settings in Apple's Safari browser. The first was a $22.5 million settlement with the Federal Trade Commission, at the time the largest civil penalty the FTC had ever obtained for a violation of a commission order. This was not recklessness, this was strategy. The data was too valuable to leave uncollected, and the fines were a fraction of what the data was worth. For 2 decades, Google operated at a scale so vast that the question wasn't whether it had power, but whether anyone had the tools to measure it. In 2024, they finally did. On August 5th, 2024, Judge Amit Mehta of the United States District Court for the District of Columbia ruled that Google held monopoly power in the markets for general search engine services and text advertising, and had unlawfully used that power to keep competitors out of those markets and drive up digital ad prices. At the time of the suit, Google held almost 90% of the market share for computer searches and nearly 95% of the share for smartphone searches. Judge Mehta's ruling focused on the billions of dollars Google spent every year to install its search engine as the default option on new phones and tech gadgets. In 2021 alone, Google spent more than $26 billion to lock in those default agreements. Justice Department lawyers argued that Google's monopoly enabled it to charge advertisers artificially high prices, while also enjoying the luxury of not having to invest more time and money into improving the quality of its search engine, a lax approach that hurt consumers. In April 2025, a federal judge ruled that Google had also formed an illegal monopoly in its advertising technology business, its second antitrust ruling in less than a year. The judge found that the company's conduct had substantially harmed publishers and, ultimately, consumers of information on the open web. Combined, Google's legal challenges across multiple jurisdictions now exceed $15 billion in fines and penalties. In May 2025, the state of Texas secured a $1.375 billion settlement, the largest recovery ever obtained by a single state attorney general against Google for secretly tracking users' movements, private searches, and biometric data without consent, even after users had turned off location tracking. The Department of Justice's response was unambiguous. The court ruling is clear. Google is a monopolist and has abused its monopoly power. Google's unlawful dominance allows them to censor and even deplatform American voices, and at the same time Google destroyed and hid information that exposed its illegal conduct. As the reckoning came, as regulators circled, as journalists investigated, as his own employees organized and sued, Larry Page did something remarkable for a man with his power. He disappeared. Page has been noticeably absent from product launches and earnings calls since 2013, and had not done a press event since 2015. Daily decisions are reportedly made by Google CEO Sundar Pichai and a handful of advisors. People close to Page told Bloomberg he spends an increasing amount of time on his private island in the Caribbean. During the pandemic, Page reportedly spent extended periods on tropical islands in Fiji, entering the country through a system designed to allow the ultra-wealthy to circumvent COVID-19 travel restrictions. Fijian authorities helped Page keep his presence on the islands private. When a local broadcaster reported that Page had donated medical supplies to Fiji via private jet, Fijian health authorities asked the network to take the article down, saying the information should not be public. Neither Page nor co-founder Sergey Brin have faced the same level of scrutiny as other tech founders, including Zuckerberg, Bezos, and Tim Cook, all of whom have been called to testify before Congress. And yet, through special voting stock, Page and Brin retain the ability at any time to overrule management and impose their will on the company. He controls everything. He answers for nothing, and the motto that launched it all. In 2015, when Google was restructured under Alphabet, the motto was quietly changed to "Do the right thing." The phrase was then removed almost entirely from the Code of Conduct in 2018, with just one reference remaining at the end. As one analyst put it, "Don't be evil" was no longer a true reflection of the company's values. It was now nothing more than just another corporate marketing tool. The man who put those words in there made sure they would be hard to remove, then he removed them anyway. And no one was there to ask him why. So who is Larry Page? He is a man who genuinely believed from childhood that technology was the answer to every question. A brilliant, introverted engineer who saw the chaos of the world and built a system to sort it, and in doing so built a system that sorted people too. He is the architect of the most elegant business model in history. Give you everything for free and make you the product. Build a search engine, then build the ads, then build the phone, then build the map. Build a map, then know everywhere you've been, Scholars who have studied Google's business model describe what ordinary users entered into as a 21st century Faustian pact, supplying and providing data indefinitely in exchange for services that feel free but cost something far harder to reclaim: behavioral sovereignty. Larry Page did not build a surveillance machine out of malice. He built it out of ambition and then kept building it because it worked, because the data funded the moonshots, because the moonshots justified the data, because the algorithm that ranks information also quietly ranks people. And when the bill came due, when courts ruled and regulators acted and citizens demanded answers, the man at the center of it all was nowhere to be found. He had vanished into the system he built, the one that knows where everyone is except him.